Coming up next on Meet the Farmer TV. This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Nelly Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design.
You know, it's really interesting to think about how things that are old are becoming new again in agriculture in some ways. If you think about in the early 1900s, mid-1900s, consumers were buying things locally, but then as technology improved, you had grocery stores, larger grocery stores, you have this vertical integration that occurred, all this high technology in agriculture that occurred to make things better, and now we seem to be kind of moving back. Consumers are wanting to buy things that are locally grown. They're shopping in grocery stores the grocery stores are smaller. They're set up with displays that kind of mimic small local farmers market type situations. So it's interesting to think about how that all these things are coming back around full circle to what they used to be.
What another big plus for this, in my opinion, is young people, if children could get a better idea of where their food comes from and get a closer connection with the farming community, I think they could have greater pride in their community and also be more interested at an earlier age in their own nutrition. This obesity in young kids is getting to be a bad problem, and a lot of it's due to just a poor diet. They need to understand what healthy food is and what the unhealthy kind of junk food is really doing to them.
You don't have to convince older adults to eat local produce. That's what they ate growing up. Right. So this becomes a reminiscent thing for them and a social experience as well. If you teach young students how to buy and prepare and cook local produce, that's something they'll probably do for the rest of their lives and pass it on to their kids. So you then have an even more sustainable agricultural system. Local food is like having kids. If you wait around until you have enough money to have children, you'll never have children. If you wait for enough money to buy local produce and to, get the staff to prep it, you'll never get local produce in your menu. You just got to start with it. We kind of have taken on the belief it's like a four-pronged fork system. You eat for flavor, you eat for nutrition, you eat for the environment, and you eat for the local economy. And what are those four things possibly going to be? Local food. So you can ask yourself, am I making every bite count? What I'm putting in my mouth, am I getting the nutrition? Is it the best taste it can be? Am I helping the economy locally? And am I helping the environment? And if you can say, I'm eating a four-pronged mouthful of food right now, that's pretty darn good. So,
when I got elected, my only goal with agriculture was save the family farm. I didn't talk about production, I didn't talk about acreage, I just said figure out ways to help family farms, and especially small family farms, be successful. And in that, despite the fact that there are certainly challenges, they've really, really worked hard. And projects like this, the reason I'm here is I want to spotlight a project like this, which I think has great promise. And we're seeing it all across the Commonwealth, whether it's wineries or whether it's a cidery or whether it's other special products that are now being grown because people want to have locally grown produce or organic produce. We're seeing this really help farmers succeed. When we do that, we help farmers, we help the environment, we preserve natural beauty, we provide opportunities for tourism. It's just like the best win-win there is when an operation like this that's a family farm can find a niche where they can really be successful.
Buy local, buy fresh, know where your product comes from is where the small farmers are going to flourish. Not that they shouldn't worry about trying to get bigger and going to the national markets, but the small farmers and the specialty crop farmers that I know in Virginia, they're going to flourish by going to farmers markets such as Williamsburg and DuPont Circle and what have you, and developing their relationship with their neighbors in that local regional market, because today people want to know where, buy fresh, buy local, where it's coming, and who grew it.
The local food movement has a huge impact on our local economy. For instance, in 1910, the farmer received about 40 cents of every dollar, and the rest went to marketers and suppliers and what have you. But now the farmer only receives about 9 cents. And by preserving the direct farm to consumer relationship, we can change that back and put that money back in the farmer's pocket. So right now our industrial food system has left us with unlabeled hormone-laden milk. It has us eating food that's laden with chemicals and preservatives, and it basically revolves around huge commodities that go to 4 different food crops, 5 if you consider cotton, but we don't eat a whole lot of cotton. And so what we need to do is go back to the small-scale industrial model where we know that folks that grow our food, and there are so many benefits to choosing local food over what is being touted as cheap food, because cheap food actually does come with a cost, and a lot of these costs we really just don't recognize. For example, the $25 billion in subsidies that we spend on our commodities, and the environmental abuse that our land is taking as a result of the monoculture of the industrial agricultural system. We also have become heavily dependent on foreign oil to not only grow our food, but to process it and to distribute it and package it. And as the cost of oil and the availability of oil becomes more and more scarce and expensive, this is going to be a problem. So we'd be wise to localize our food supply as much as possible. And we need people growing as much of their own food as possible. And what they can't grow, hopefully they can get from their local farmer. So one of the things that we really hope to accomplish is to convince people to go out and vote with your fork. So by buying local food, you're going to help keep that money in our local economy. You're going to help keep more of that dollar in the farmer's pocket. You're going to have tastier, more nutritious food. You're going to have tighter communities because you're going to have relationships with the people that grow your food. We're going to have cleaner air and water and better soil from agricultural practices that actually build soil as opposed to destroy soil. We're going to have better health and lower medical costs. The benefits are what we call the multiplier effect. So if we can get people out there and understand that every time they're in the grocery store or every time they're at a restaurant or making a food choice, the more that they can do to support local food, the benefits are many, far and wide. Well, basically our industrial agriculture system is a centralized system that really hasn't served us, and even though we get everything bigger and faster and cheaper, it really does come at quite a cost. So cheap food really does have a price tag that we really don't recognize. It comes to us in the form of our tax dollars being spent on subsidies for large farms that pollute our earth, treat our animals inhumanely, and basically produce low-quality food that has been linked to our current crisis with obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. So really what's happened is, as a society, we've become disconnected to nature, and because of that we have relied on human technology to create our systems, and what we're finding is these systems are actually quite vulnerable. And if we look at the natural model, we see a system that is quite holistic, and everything is interconnected, and what affects one affects the next. And so what we're starting to see that, and we're learning the hard way, so that we'd be wise to hunker down now and work from a different perspective, in that we recognize that our actions here affect folks in other places. So one advancement that has been made is the passing of the Home Kitchens Bill, which was passed this July. What that does is it allows home food processors to bake certain types of foods in their homes without having to go through a certified kitchen. For example, you can have baked goods, you can do jams and jellies, and you can do candies all in your kitchen if you follow the proper labeling procedure on those products. And these products, by the way, are only allowed to be sold direct farmer to consumer. You still can't sell these through a retailer, but you can indeed sell them at a farmer's markets. So one of the best things we can do to safeguard our food supply is to relocalize our food supply and get to know who grows your food and their growing practices. Because you see, when we have a centralized industrial model, if something does happen like an outbreak or a disease, it's going to affect millions of people. But when you're dealing with small-scale producers who know their customers, they're going to put that extra care and energy into making sure they deliver to you the safest, freshest, most nutritious food possible. and therefore the threat of anything going wrong is severely lessened. And communities all over the country could be hunkering down and getting to know the folks in their agricultural community, and the benefits are going to be safer food, more nutritious food. So through relocalizing our food supply, we're going to be lessening the great distances our food is transported, which is an average of 1,500 miles. Another thing that we can do as consumers of food is to start taking responsibility for growing more of our own food, and that can be in terms of tearing up your front lawn and turning it into a garden, or there are many community gardens springing up all kinds of places now in urban areas where folks get together and garden together. Rooftop gardening is becoming popular again. Vertical gardening, which means growing plants on the outside and up on the side of your house. There are many opportunities to get involved.
I spend a lot of my time traveling around the world teaching other people about holistic management, how to improve the soil, heal the land, and improve their standard of living. So it's my passion that young people should get the opportunity to be able to ranch and live off the land. Not only live off the land, but to enjoy a good standard of living. At the moment, I feel ranchers and farmers are at the bottom of the social heap, and really the rest of the world needs us, and yet we have been discarded as second-class citizens, and it's not just in America, it's throughout the world. So it's on that basis that I travel around the world telling people that it is possible to make a living off the land, but we need to change the way we manage. And to me, holistic management enables us as humans to think in a multi-dimensional way and to make decisions that are socially sound, environmentally sound, and financially sound. And it's what we call the triple bottom line. We are told that we have improved seeds. I don't know where improved seeds come from when nature has been improving natural seeds for 1,000 or more years, and all of a sudden over a 20 or a 5-year period, a company comes up with an improved seed, but in actual fact, it is not improved per se. It needs more water, it needs more fertilizer. So if we go back to the equation of energy in, energy out, we're in a negative situation and we're on a losing streak. So we need to think about what we're doing and change what we're doing. I think we need to sit and watch nature a bit and understand what happened with the predator-prey relationship, and that the predators kept these big herds of bison in your country and buffalo in our country together, and any one that was sick, lame, or lazy or didn't reproduce, it fell out of the herd and it was eliminated from the genetic pool. And that is why form follows function, and the function of the animal is to reproduce in the environment in which it's born and nothing else. The amount of milk it produces, etc., will all happen if you select just for form follows function. But we haven't, because we've had the ability to feed bales and do all these expensive things, and the money has ended up in the towns instead of back on the ranches or on the farms. So on that basis, it's much what I teach, that people don't need anything. In fact, the townspeople in the world need us as agriculturalists, and we deserve to take our proper place in society, and I think our turn is about to come.
There's been a lot of publicity lately about foodborne illness outbreaks, and people becoming afraid or fearful of certain products as a result of the illnesses that have been spread through contaminated foods. And this is becoming a real problem, because when the public loses confidence in the food supply and starts making decisions based on fear, it affects everyone who's involved in producing those products, from the largest to the smallest farms. And so lately, over the last several years, there's been an increasing movement, largely led by consumer groups, who are feeling the brunt of the consequences of bad food handling practices. And these consumer groups have been pressing harder for more regulation and more government intervention in the processes of growing, processing, and distributing food. So what I want to share is a little bit of a perspective about what may be the real cause of the problem, but more so than that, because I think in some ways those causes are not fully understood, what can be the steps to create a healthier food system and restore public confidence in the food supply. And I think it's a complicated problem by now because there's been years of, sort of trial and error and almost random or sporadic efforts to improve these things, but there's not been a completely systematic approach in this country that's been well integrated and well thought out and well executed and well followed through. And in other parts of the world, it's more systematic and followed through a little bit better, and I think the results are better. I'm a believer that it's not going to be that easy to make local food cheaper, and it's equally important to make global food healthier. And that we are, in fact, one food system, from the smallest to the largest. We have strengths to share and we have weaknesses to address, regardless of scale. And that developing developing a food safety system and developing training and quality assurance and best practices and science to share what we learn across the full spectrum of food production and food supply systems is what's going to be needed to create a healthy agriculture that's good for the environment, good for our local economies, good for all species, and in fact is capable of supporting our growing human population. For me, it's not a time, the local and regional and small-scale movement of which I personally am a participant, is not a global solution. It's not by itself going to feed the world. What is needed is a harmonious and well-balanced approach to agriculture, which creates healthy commodities, healthy lower-cost food, and also increases access to the very special and unique attributes of locally produced food. We find ourselves in this situation with a food safety system that, for the most part, is described as broken. We've gotten that way through a combination of factors, and one of them is the increasing complexity of the sort of global and industrial food system. So we've got a combination of factors. We've got, with the globalization of food and the massive rehandling and processing and repackaging of food, we have more opportunities for contamination or loss of sanitation in the food. And then in addition to that, we know that we have a more complicated system, and to be honest, the regulatory oversight and the training and the kinds of support that's necessary to ensure that a complex system doesn't lose those necessary attributes, that's been lacking. So those are the two factors that work together to get us into the situation that what I think is the situation that we're in today. A lot of people say that we are not regulated enough, and I think actually we're over-regulated, but we're over-regulated in some poorly coordinated and poorly executed ways. So the big challenge right now is that the consumer groups who defend the victims of food safety and foodborne illness outbreaks are speaking for more and more regulation, when in fact what we need is better training and better integration and better execution of a more streamlined regulatory process, particularly a regulatory process that focuses on known areas of risk, and also a scientific support process that uncovers and identifies new areas of risk and treats them with a level of scrutiny that's appropriate for each level of risk. Well, right now, with so much emphasis being put forward to create new laws and new regulations and new rules to try to guide the food system, one of the most important things that consumers and other interested people can do is to keep an eye on this process and speak clearly for the goal of safe and healthy food, but without sacrificing full range of choice. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to regulation and when it comes to designing government intervention, most of those processes are aimed at the techniques and methods of the largest farms and the largest food businesses. Those, in many cases, those are the businesses from which the most widespread foodborne illness outbreaks originate, and they're also the businesses that are best able to address complex or detailed government intervention and government regulation. So what tends to happen is, if a problem is directed to big business for a solution, the solutions that are developed are solutions that fit big business's model. one of the unintended consequences that happens as a result of that approach is that farms of lesser scale with less resources and different skill sets are oftentimes inadvertently swept aside in the rush to create regulatory processes and interventions that are appropriate for the largest farms. So the real key, the thing to watch out for now, and on all of our part, is that we not, in our haste to create healthier and safer food, that we not unintentionally eliminate choice, which is, for example, the choice of going directly to your farmer's market, or the choice of supporting a farm that has a diverse set of products and a diverse set of practices on that farm. The large-scale agriculture approach is organized commodity by commodity. So, for example, if tomatoes are deemed risky, and a special set of practices are developed to assure that tomatoes are safe when they're distributed on a fresh market basis, those methods for a farm that only sells tomatoes look very different than what those methods would look like for a diversified farm. A farm that has livestock, a farm that has visitors, a farm that hosts school groups. So the real important thing right now is, in our zeal to create safer large-scale food system, that we not lose the choice as to how we support medium and smaller scale and direct marketed food production and farming. And so I really encourage our viewers to keep an eye on activist organizations like Food and Water Watch and others who are tracking these changes, are tracking the proposed regulatory and FDA enhancement processes. And these are the groups that are going to warn us when they see that our freedom of choice is being impinged on, and our freedom to farm in certain ways is being impinged on by these moves to create a safer large-scale food system. In order to improve the science of food safety, we need collaboration between our land-grant universities and the sciences that live there, and farming practices of all types and scales. It's very important that science be applied to organic farming, that science be applied to diversified farming, and that science be applied also to large-scale and commodity-type farming. What tends to happen is we understand that large-scale farming feeds the world, and we tend to direct our science to support, refine, and perfect the processes that we believe will feed the most people. And that research is important, but equally important is the research as to what makes small and diversified farms work. What makes them healthy in their contribution to the local environment, or the habitat aspect, or the ecology, because the science of understanding the mechanics of diversified farming could in fact in the end help us feed the world by bringing us answers that are scalable and appropriate on larger farms. So the science that most of us that support the idea that we need a food system that's healthy at all scales, the science that we're looking for is a science that's scale neutral, that looks at problems and solutions in farms of all shapes and sizes, and seeks to share the knowledge that's gleaned through that process in ways that enable best practices to be improved by all farms of all scales. If we look at the experience of farming and relationship between farming and market and consumer, and we look at that more globally, what we find out is that somewhere in the mid-90s to late 90s, when these foodborne illness outbreaks began to occur in more widespread fashion, began to get more media publicity, the traceback skills became better so we could actually begin to find the sources of the problems. Well, one of the first places where attention was brought to this problem was in Europe, where the agricultural heritage of Europe is not the same as the United States. It's a more mixed farm and diverse farm approach, and the consumers in Europe also tended to articulate concerns or values beyond simply how do I get my food cheap. So when Europe began to look at the question of how to develop good agricultural practices that support healthy economy, healthy consumer, healthy land, they saw not strictly a government intervention approach, they also saw a private-public partnership kind of approach. And out of that approach came a set of privately developed good agricultural practices that went at the time by the name Eurogaps, which paid particular attention to market access and best practices at farms of all scales. I think there's a lot of, and that Eurogaps program eventually became renamed Global Gaps in recognition of the fact that the food system that served Europe was actually a global system. And Global Gaps is now working its way, if you will, around the world to try and bring that vision of good agricultural practices with its balanced approach and its stakeholder-based process and its equitable emphasis on buyer responsibility, transportation and distributor responsibility, and on-farm best practices to try and bring those ideas into bear in the United States. And so it's a pretty exciting time for us. On the one hand, we struggle with this push for a top-down, government intervention, sort of one-size-fits-all solution that will make people more comfortable and perhaps address the fears that have emerged about the safety of our food. But at the same time, some of these global solutions are now coming our way. And so it's going to be, I think we're in the beginning of a time where there's going to be a kind of a synthesis of approaches. The U.S. public really does trust, expect, and respect our government's ability to regulate. That's in some ways unique. In other parts of the world, their governments are not expected and respected for that capability. So we're going to rely on effective government regulation, but we're going to need to do it in a partnership with a private kind of initiative like Global Gaps, where responsibility is shared, information is shared, and best practices are in a constant process of improvement. Those two mechanisms will interface well with each other and will probably alleviate the cost to the public of the regulatory intervention, and will also continually support the development and enhancement of best practices and information sharing among private businesses. If we look for an example of public-private collaboration in the area of food safety, and we look outside the United States, again, the Global Gaps program comes to mind, comes clear as an example. What happens with Global Gaps is that because farms are involved in the good agricultural practice and certification process that Global Gaps delivers, that makes them, in many ways, it increases government confidence in those practices at those farms. That allows the regulators in these governments to concentrate their efforts on the riskier and more potentially dangerous hazard and control points where food safety is a greater issue. So what happens is that the private partners establish the common gaps, if you will, the basics like sanitation and hygiene and worker health and the kind of training that goes to simply, these trainings are fundamental to any place where human beings work. And so if the private partnership delivers more of the needed skill set to address those aspects of food safety, then the government is freer to concentrate on the more specialized issues. And in fact, its limited resources can be brought to bear in more useful ways at aspects of the food system where there could potentially be greater risk. I think that in America, what we stand for is freedom of choice. We stand for freedom of expression. And if we create a homogenized food system that's designed to feed the world from large commodity farms, we have given up our freedom of choice. The challenge in speaking for choice is that the larger scale food system, with its many important positive attributes, misunderstands us to be saying that we aren't part of the food safety solution, and we are. So the balancing act is the balancing act that says we want to contribute to food safety solutions. We want to assure as much as anyone else that our food isn't harming anyone, but we want to do so in ways that preserve our choice as to how to operate our business, our choice as to how to distribute to our public, and in turn preserves our public's choice of our food as an option.
This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Nelly Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design. For additional information and extended versions of this program, visit our website, www.meetthefarmer.com.